Welcome to St. Lucy's Guide, a podcast by and for those of us with a disability, and for all who champion our inclusion. Together, we dive deeper into our faith to help our church become a place where everyone truly belongs. I'm pleased to introduce our host, Bob Furtado, a blind public scholar in the field of disability theology. Journey with us into a realm where the rich knowledge and imagination of theologians intersect with the lived realities, fears, and frustrations of disability. Guided by St. Lucy, we move around the walls of prejudice and false teachings, avoiding the pitfalls of misnomers as we head toward that clearing where all have a home. Open your heart, clear the path, and join us as we begin this journey. This is St. Lucy's Guide.
A theology big enough for everybody. Welcome to St. Lucy's Guide, the podcast where you and I explore the deep wells of theology with an aim towards real life. In this episode, we take a long, careful walk through St. Pope John Paul II's Theology of the Body lectures. Not as an abstract philosophy, but as a living theology that speaks directly to the lives of those of us with a disability. Now, I realize we cannot talk about all of this at one time, so we will only talk about the first cycle of these talks that deal with three particular areas. 1, original solitude. 2, original unity, and 3, original nakedness. But I realize that these lectures, Theology of the Body, were given each Wednesday beginning in September of 1979 and went on to November of 1984. But in the past 40 years, there have been many books written on these lectures as it relates to, well, for kids, starting with toddlers and going through high schoolers, aimed to explain the theology of the body. There are books specifically written for men. There are books specifically written for women. There are books specifically written for people of color, even indigenous people. There are books that aim towards explaining social justice in liberatory theology, but none of them on disability. And after 40 years, the time is now to speak about it. So that's what I want to do today. The theology of the body is often misunderstood as a theology only about sexuality or marriage. But at its heart, it is a theology of 1, the human person. Also, the meaning of embodiment and the dignity of everybody and a call to communion with one another and the destiny of the body in glory and how can it impact us today. And that means it is a theology for every person, including those of us with a disabled body. And again, we will walk through just the first major cycle of all of these lectures. It was entitled Original Man. And here we can explore the highlights of St. Pope John Paul II's teaching on it and what he says about the meaning of the body and how these teachings speak to the lived experience of those of us with a disability today, and how it can affect you and I. The first cycle, Cycle 1, was entitled Original Man. These Wednesday audiences covered the first 23 lectures that were given between September 1979 and ran through January of 1980. And specifically, what was he talking about? In the beginning, the body as revelation. St. Pope John Paul II began by returning to Genesis, and not to reconstruct the history, but to uncover the original experience of the human person. And again, he expounded in these lectures on the idea of original solitude, original unity, and original nakedness. And again, these are not events, they are anthropological truths. And let's start with the original solitude, right? I am known by God. Here, think of that moment after God creates Adam, but before he creates Eve. Adam all alone. St. Pope John Paul II teaches that before the human person encounters another human being, they encounter God. The human person discovers, I am unique. Also, I am unrepeatable. Also, I am willed for my own sake. I have my own purpose. How does that affect those of us with a disability? We have those moments in our lives when we are alone with God. We find our own solitude and we ask certain questions, such as, who am I? Why am I even here? And we want to be in a place we are comfortable and accepting of how we are made. Once we achieve that, we can find our own peace and place within the world. But a person with a disability, such as myself, may hear messages like, you are a burden, or you are less capable, or you are defined by your limitations. But this concept of original solitude says, you are defined by God's love, not ability. You are willed by God. You are wanted by God. Some things that can help us today that will help us understand this is that while we are trying to find that solitude, we still face many unique challenges in how we perceive ourselves and how society treats us. And our experiences of solitude can mean we're also wrestling at this moment, grappling with stereotypes and barriers or feelings of setting apart from our other humans in our culture because of the way that we perceive our body, and to understand our own identity in the world and the worth that we have. So, this personal solitude can be a place that we are both wrestling with what we understand from the world and our place in a relationship with God. It might help us to deal in wrestling with that because we want to get to that place when we are able to define ourselves beyond the limitations other people seem to place on us and find that deep inherent value of who we are. And there are times we need to go through that process. Both you and I have probably gone through that. I certainly have. And here we can take a journey that includes body image. Maybe you've heard that phrase, body image. We go through that process when we look to ourselves and try to put aside the stereotypes that are given through the media and ableist ideas and attitudes. It's much like the programs and the toolkits that help girls and women overcome bad body imaging and self image. We have to wrestle with the same things. And there are areas that we have to wrestle with. We know that there are programs equal in the disability community to help us go through that challenge of moving through body image and settle it in our minds, to put aside all the nonsense that comes from all of that media and social attitudes and deal with it ourselves. And we need to come to a place when we become comfortable with our own bodies, just how they are made. Sometimes it takes a long time to get there, but we can do that. Also, I recognize that there are people who will acquire a disability later in life, and they're not born with a disability. And they have a difficult time too wrestling with this in their own solitude. I don't know about you, but I have noticed that these people seem to go through the same four stages of grief before they are able to accept who they are. But St. Paul John Paul II wants us to get to that place, that clearing where we can stand before God and know we are okay and how we are in the body God gave us. The next part of the original solitude, it has different parts to it. And I think one of these parts I refer to as self-determination. God gave us free will, and as a result, we have our own self-determination. And I would emphasize that you and I, we simply do not have to be passive in our own lives. What about someone who decides they want to learn a new skill, maybe how to paint, maybe play a musical instrument, even though it might take an adaptive tools or different methods or ways of doing something, we certainly can be active and find resources that help us to be able to acquire that skill. We need to set aside time to practice and to keep ourselves motivated to achieve that goal. But we can do that. We don't have to be passive in our life. We can use our own active agent. Once we are comfortable with ourselves, too, then we can have a good relationship with someone else. But you've got to get yourself to the point where you know yourself, and then you can move on and have a good relationship with someone else. Another aspect of original solitude is the interiority awareness, awareness of our own thoughts and feelings and the choices that we make in our interior world. Is part what makes us realize that we are a free person, different from everybody else. And our body begins to reveal our inner world. It expresses it through our personhood, the way that we act as a person, how you might gesture, or wear a certain color, or do certain things and laugh in a certain way. For me, I think of it as dancing, adaptive dancing. Even those people who may dance while using a wheelchair. Imagine someone rushing on stage and they aim their wheelchair to run up a ramp. And once they are in the air, they spin two, three times while holding a silk streamer to perform an interpretive dance. We can be active in that and be self expressive and find our own unique identity as individuals while simultaneously points to our own inherent need for community. This journey binds its fulfillment in original unity, where man and woman complete each other and help us develop our place within our own community. It doesn't limit itself to the marital relationship, but our relationship within our own community. So let's move on to the second aspect of this, the original unity. We are made for communion. St. Pope John Paul II teaches that human beings are created for relationship, that our bodies reveal the need for others. And there's an internal call to communion with other people, a truth that we are not self sufficient. That's the reality. We need other people. And how this speaks to us in our culture, a culture that idolizes independence. But here within theology of the body, we learn that Dependence is not a flaw. It is part of being a human being. The duality of dignity and different modes of being still has equal dignity. Men and women can be different, but we can have equal dignity, and we can certainly provide respect for all bodies. The notion for need for communion is just there. For example, we can be in a committed relationship that goes beyond the physical, a total giving of ourselves. We can be a gift to our spouse and bring happiness to that spouse and support and emotional support to another person. Share our wisdom, our knowledge. In doing so, we can find ourselves when we give ourselves to another person. It helps us know ourselves even better. An aspect of this original unity is the law of the gift, and this makes us more free. Basically, the law of the gift is the idea that we find our true selves only by making a sincere gift of ourselves. St. Pope John Paul II taught that our bodies and our very existence are gifts from God to a fulfillment that comes from loving and serving others, not living in solitude. Think of someone who takes time to volunteer to the community, be part of our world. I certainly know the benefits of that, the emotional joy that I feel when I'm able to contribute, even in small volunteer activities. And there certainly are a lot that is out there that maybe resonate with you. This perfect communion finds its most profound expression in the original nakedness. Here, man and woman can see each other fully, totally, in a transparent way, with no fear of being used or objectified, because their unity is rooted in pure love and respect. So we can move on to the third and the final area of this cycle. That is to say, the original nakedness. The body is good. The Saint Pope John Paul II teaches that before sin, the body was seen without shame. The body was transparent, it was expressive, and it was good. And how that can speak to you and I, we have those same feelings that we can bring to ourselves, but with a recognition that we have to overcome the ideas of shame and embarrassment, look past the social stigmas that are out there, the unwanted attention that we get when we go out into public. We all have to tolerate those things. But the theology of the body suggests that your body is not a mistake. Your body is not shameful. Your body is a revelation of your own personhood, and that we should go out into the community with no desire to use each other, but with the problem that comes along, I think, with all that is that there's a habit of one trying to camouflage or mask our disabilities so that we go out into the world and try to blend in and go unnoticed as a person with a physical disability and try to hide it from the world so we don't get that unwanted attention. The problem with doing that, of course, is that it affects the relationship with that you could have with someone else because then they become unaware of the true person that you are. And starting a relationship with a lie is never a good place to start to develop a good, healthy relationship. So we've got to be careful that we don't try to camouflage or mask who we are so that we can encounter people in a true and honest way so that people can see us and accept us as who we are. Another part of this original nakedness is the interior freedom, a place where there are no barriers to the self, and certainly no desires to use one another, that we can be at peace with ourselves and we can be at peace with other people, and we can embrace other people in a dignified way, that we can encounter people as a creature of God with their own dignity, and we can express that properly in our communication with them. Some things that get in the way, yes, are the selfish desires and trying to use people, objectify them. And I think this can happen when we spend too much time alone. I think that our culture within the disability community tends to lead to that as a habit. We spend too much time alone, and then when we go out, there's a distortion in how we encounter one another. And we need to avoid that. It's tough to get out there, but you and I need to do exactly that. We need to get out into the world and find those people that will accept us and we can accept them and get practice doing that. Another part of the original nakedness is the interior gaze. This interior gaze is the viewed in the context about seeing past the body as just a physical shell, a way of seeing and knowing an entire person for their dignity and their soul as a complete person with peace and reverence to them. In other words, if we want to be included and accepted as to who we are, we certainly have to be able to do that with someone else and accept them no matter how they look. St. Pope John Paul II describes it as being absent of any desires or ambitions to control or manipulate other people, and to simply see them as pure gifts and look for the pure reverence so that we can be able to provide to them the gifts that we have to offer, and we can communicate with them to find out what gifts they have and perhaps it's something that we need. Because of the fall, this doesn't always happen. Many times people see others as objects, or they will try to do things in a selfish way to see what they can get out of it. They're not willing to give up that control. But we need to be able to do that, to encounter people with dignity and self control. And when it goes wrong, well, what happens? This is where we get the biases and the ableism. Those people who want to be able to feel superior to us. So they come at us with those kinds of attitudes. So they can feel better about themselves without any real work. They can just use their words to make themselves feel superior. And if we're going to put that aside, we have to actively do that with other people ourselves so that a loving exchange becomes the common thing rather than the exception. But we have to make sure that we are doing the same things and dealing with people. But I find that that doesn't always happen within even the disability community. As an entire population, it seems that we tend to segregate ourselves into groups of people within this that have the same disability that we do. We don't reach out to the other parts of our disability community who might have a totally different disability than we do, and we don't communicate like we should, and we need to be able to bridge that gap for all sorts of reasons, but more in particular today, as we're talking about theology of the body, to accept them and to reach out and make that effort. Even if they're not doing that, we need to overcome that so that even as a disability community, we can find unity within that. How can we do that? Well, one thing that we can do certainly is to use the virtues to help us get there. In particular, we can use the virtue of chastity, that is, self control. And this will help us perceive the other person as a whole person. Another way can be using the virtues of temperance and prudence Temperance helps by giving us self mastery over our own desires so we don't view others as objects. Then prudence acts like a director, guiding our choices towards true love and by helping us understand the true meaning of the body and apply temperance correctly, and therefore help to treat other people fairly and with dignity. To sum all of this up, we can emphasize that original solitude means that we have an understanding of our own inherent values, come from being created by God, and called to relationship with Him, regardless of our physical capacities. And original unity shows that a person like me with a disability can truly be a gift, bring in a unique capacity for love and vulnerability to a spouse or used within our community. And finally, original nakedness invites us to see each other as a whole person, respecting the soul present within every body, not judging them on a physical appearance or ability. This confirms that everybody's role as an active agent in God. Please leave your comments below. Let me know what you think of this idea of exploring theology of the body as it relates to a disabled body. Thank you.
If you like what you heard today, you can email us, like, share, and comment on Spotify, Facebook, or YouTube.